If I ask you whether you are a responsible person, I'm guessing you'd probably say yes. I mean, you're someone who pays your bills on time, you go to work, you save money, and you try not to make reckless decisions that will impact your money. You do what you've always been told responsible adults do. But I want to ask you a different question. What if being responsible isn't the same as intentionally building the future you want? Because over the years, I've noticed something. Some of the most responsible people I've ever met quietly reach their 60s wondering, why doesn't anything feel different? They didn't do anything wrong. They simply never stopped long enough to ask whether the path they were on was actually taking them where they wanted to go. I think most of us grow up believing that responsibility has a checklist. I know this is how I raised my daughter. I said, get an education, get a good job, pay your bills, save for retirement, and don't take unnecessary risks with your money. And, none of those things are wrong, but here's what I've noticed. That responsibility checklist tells us how to protect what we already have. It doesn't necessarily teach us how to create more options, more financial options. A few years ago, I was sitting at a kitchen table with a husband and wife who had decided it was time to sell their home. He had spent his career as a firefighter, and she had stayed home to raise their children. They worked hard. They loved their kids. They paid their bills, and they made sacrifices every single month. As we talked more, they started telling me about those sacrifices that they had made over the years. So they were telling me that there were years when they skipped family vacations. They wanted their kids to play sports, be in dance, have piano lessons, and sometimes there just wasn't enough money to go around to do all of those things at once. There were school activities. So every extra dollar that they seemed to find went towards giving their children these opportunities that they had never had. And as we were talking, the husband said something that I have never forgotten. And what he said is he had never really thought about investing. And mainly it was because they just didn't know where to start. They didn't know who to trust. They didn't know what questions to ask. They just told me that they kept trying to make it through the next month. Now, they were getting close to retirement and they had realized that the sale of their house was going to be a big part of their retirement. He did have his pension from being a firefighter. He picked up odd jobs here and there, and they financially, they weren't in trouble. And sometimes she also picked up a job here and there. So they continue to be responsible people, but they did ask themselves this as we were talking. They just wondered, could they have created more financial options if they had just started asking different questions earlier in their careers? And I don't tell you that story because I think they made bad decisions. I think it's very common for most people. That's how we live. That's what we were taught. I tell you the story because I think they made some of the same decisions that millions of responsible families make. They spent years taking care of everyone else, and they just never stopped long enough to initially build financial options for themselves. I see this time and time again when people have one or two sources of income, and you'll see it on Facebook posts where they will be talking about how can I make extra money, or the money that I'm making, is it covering my bills, or my husband just lost his job. So when we are prisoner, for a lack of better word, to one source of income, then that can impact us. That can impact people just like you who are responsible. But now it forces you into a situation where you don't have enough money to pay your bills because you relied on one source of income. So the way I look at this is that responsibility can become so focused on today that tomorrow quietly becomes an afterthought. We think about today. Do I have enough money today? So over the years, I don't ask the question, are you being responsible? First of all, that's not my place, is it? So only you can decide if you're going to be responsible, and only you can decide if you're going to create financial options. But what I will ask you is, while you're taking care of today, what are you doing to create more financial options for your tomorrow? And those are two very different questions. So most of the families that I work with, they are not irresponsible. They just spent years protecting what they built without intentionally creating new options, meaning that they were generally working a job or they have some profession that they are feeling very comfortable with. And then some life event happens. In this particular case, retirement. Sometimes at the end of our working career, we look at, do I have enough money to sustain the lifestyle that I want? Or is my lifestyle going to be impacted because I don't have enough retirement? Or I only have one asset. As a lot of families I work with, they have the equity in their home is the only asset that they have for retirement. So looking back, they wish they had spent a little time each year exploring what other options were available. And, I always say to folks, it's never too late. You can always start learning about how to build income beyond one source of income. We talk about building your income beyond your paycheck, but what if you're only receiving retirement? Can you then create another financial option? Yes, you can. And when I meet with families who are in similar situations, I always stress that you don't have to be stuck with just one financial option. It's never too late. I started later in life down real estate investing. And again, real estate investing might not be that vehicle for you, but it's one that I know works. So when we talk about responsibility, and if you can relate to that, I think that that's where responsibility quietly becomes routine. When we go to work day in, day out, we're used to that one paycheck. We pay our bills. Life is good for today. We have enough money for today. And we stop asking new questions. We just keep doing what worked yesterday because it feels safe. But sometimes being safe and intentional aren't always the same thing. Let me show you what I mean. If we look at some attributes of being responsible versus intentional, when we're responsible, we protect what we have, and being intentional might lead to being more creative, but still being responsible. Responsible is maintaining what we have. We are protecting it. We maintain it. We go to our jobs every day. We pay our bills. And intentional just means that we're still responsible, but we're exploring different options, different ways that we could increase what we already have. When we're responsible, we just repeat. If we're being intentional, we evaluate where we're at today, where we want to go. Being responsible puts us in a routine, which if we were looking at being intentional, we would evaluate and see what other options. But I want you to notice something here. Neither column is wrong, but only one of them regularly asks the question, what else is possible? I've seen people spend months and months researching vacations, researching couches, researching, should I remodel my kitchen countertops as we are currently doing right now? And just going back and forth about contacting contractors, hours comparing cell phone plans, or how about streaming options? We spend a lot of time with what options are available out there for us to stream on our televisions. Maybe this resonates with you. You've never spent one afternoon asking, what would I like my financial life to look like 10 years from now? Now, if you've asked that and haven't answered, drop it in the comments for me. And if you haven't, it's not because you don't care, because no one ever suggested that that's what you should do, is to think about where your financial options are 10 years from now. I like to think of it as we get on a roll. We go to work, we pay our bills, and we become very, not robotic, but we become very immune to any changes because life is good. We love our job. We have enough money today, but do we really think about tomorrow? One life example that just happened to almost everybody in the country was when COVID hit. And that changed so many things, so many mind shift things, so many impacted people financially. Maybe you weren't as prepared financially as you would have liked to have been. Like you, like me, so many people were impacted by the financial hit that we all took, that we all experienced. I don't know about you, but now I always want to make sure I'm building financial options. And that's why I want you to think about the same thing. Where do you want your financial options to be in 10 years? I've had so many of these kitchen table conversations, I like to call them, that I've actually have some lessons that I'd like to share. So one is the people who create more options in their lives aren't necessarily less responsible. They just simply are more intentional about where they want to be tomorrow. And they don't wait for life to change. They regularly stop and ask, is the life I'm building still the one I want? Can you ask yourself that question? The next time you catch yourself saying, I've always done it this way, I want you to stop for a second and ask yourself, am I protecting what I've built or am I intentionally creating what's next? And those are two very different questions, aren't they? If I've maybe made you think about and realize that you've been doing everything right, but you still aren't sure you're creating more financial options for your future, that's exactly why I created Build Income Beyond Your Paycheck. This free masterclass is designed to help responsible professionals just like you decide whether real estate investing belongs in their financial life. Not because everyone should invest, because everyone deserves a framework for making that decision with clarity, whether real estate investing is right for you. You will find that link in the description below.